You all know we've been reporting this morning that Keir Starmer is going to use a major European summit to push for tougher controls on illegal migration across the continent.
The Prime Minister, who's hosting the European political community at Blenheim Palace, has called on the 47-member group to tackle international people smugglers.
Now, the Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, will be with the Prime Minister. He joins us now before then. Good morning to you, David Lammy. Thank you very much for joining us. Using this summit to push for tougher controls on illegal migration across the continent, what would you like to hear from all of those who are attending?
Well, can I just say, this is a wonderful opportunity for the United Kingdom. It's the biggest gathering of European leaders here in a generation, 75 years since we celebrate the founding by a Labour government of the Council of Europe. And this is a major opportunity to talk about security, security in Europe, of course, and our defence of Ukraine, migration, which is an issue right across the European family, to deal with those smuggling gangs, particularly at source, and also to work with neighbouring countries across the region upstream, dealing with the issues that drive migration. That's the opportunity that we've got here, and it's one that really begins our reset with Europe, building on NATO last week. OK, but what would you like to hear when you push for tougher controls on illegal migration across the continent? What would you like to hear? Which countries would you like to say what? Well, look, I've already been to Poland, Sweden and Germany. I've spoken to European foreign ministers right across the European family. All of them are raising the issue of migration. I might say they welcome the fact that we have put to bed the Rwanda scheme, which many of them saw as a thwart, really, on wider cooperation across Europe. So how can we work together with Europol? And we're increasing staff to Europol at this time. They're wanting to understand our new border command and how we will work with them and in country upstream. They're wanting to understand how we will use our aid budget. Those are the issues that we will discuss right across the European family. It's only in partnership, recognising that immigration is an issue across Europe, that we can deal with these issues. So there's no document, a communique after this summit, nothing that says you're all going to pledge to do something. So how will we know that everyone's on board? Well, Keir Starmer will have a press statement at the end of the summit. The EPC is, if you like, a more informal gathering than the European Union because, of course, it brings together countries that are outside the 27 member states of the European Union. We thought in opposition it was a good innovation, and we are using it as our opportunity to reset our relationships with Europe and reconnect Britain to the wider world. I'm keen on that phrase, reset the relationship with European allies. This was from the King's speech, and you're obviously repeating it today. And also in the King's speech, it was announced that new laws would make it easier to align with some EU rules. There will be people saying the Labour Party, the Labour government, is undoing Brexit through the back door. How do you defend that accusation? Well, if they're saying that, they'll struggle to point to ways in which, after 2 weeks in office, we have done that. Oh, well, maybe you wouldn't have done it, but you may be trying to do it. Well, let me answer the question. The first thing is to say the European Union and its Commission is not up and running after their elections last month. They won't be up and running until December. This is not a gathering of the European Union, it's a gathering of the whole European family. And of course, we're entering into discussions, but we're nowhere near a negotiation on the trade agreement, the paper-thin trade agreement that Boris Johnson struck, the veterinary deal that we've said that we want to get, the mutual qualifications that we want to work on, and the UK EU security pact that we're proposing to Europe that will enable us to discuss a whole range of issues across the European families. We aren't at that stage 2 weeks into office. Here we have the EPC. It's a gathering now of 44 leaders from the wider European family discussing issues of mutual concern. Central to that is security and Ukraine. Second is migration, and it's an issue that all European leaders want to discuss and talk about.
What EU rules will we see the UK aligned to since the King's speech announced that that was the intention?
Well, as I've said, we're not at a point of negotiation with the European Union.
But what would you like to see?
There is no European Commission to discuss those issues with. And I'm certainly not going to show my hand before negotiations have even begun with the European Union about the issues that we have said. What we have said is that we're not re-entering the single market. We're not re-entering the customs union. We do want a better trade agreement with the European Union. We want a veterinary deal with the European Union, and we're concerned about mutual qualifications and how we can deal with those issues across the European family. So that's a starter for 10.
OK.
At this stage, it's discussion only. We are nowhere near a negotiation.
You would have heard, obviously, as we're reporting this morning, you would have heard anyway that Joe Biden, the US president, has COVID. And this is, there is much speculation about whether or not he should step down in terms of, or step aside in terms of the race to become the next president. He has COVID. He's had some recent public performances which have been highly criticised. What's your opinion? Do you think he should be in the running?
Well, first off, let me wish him well in his recovery from COVID. Two, I was with him last week. He led NATO in assuring that we have a 40 billion aid package towards the fight that Ukraine are in at this moment in time. I found him to be robust on the issues, delighted to meet Keir Starmer particularly, and fully engaged. Just as the Americans did not comment on our election and get engaged, I will not be commenting on theirs. They are a great democracy. There will be a lot of debate and heat, I suspect, between now and November. That is a matter for the American people.
You've spoken about Donald Trump, Joe Biden's rival candidate for the presidency. You have described him as, and I quote, a neo-Nazi sympathising sociopath, unquote. You also labelled him a, and I quote, tyrant in a toupee, unquote. How does that set up a relationship for you and potentially him if he wins the US presidential election?
You're going to struggle to find any politician who has not had things to say about Donald Trump in his first term, particularly on Twitter. You would have struggled with our last Foreign Secretary, David Cameron, who described him as a xenophobe and a misogynist in his own book.
OK, so you may be justifying your comments,
struggle,
but how
forgive
do you
me,
go
let me
to a
answer the
man?
question. You will struggle with the vice presidential candidate that he's just selected, who's also had things to say. The truth of our relationship is it is a special relationship. We saw how special it was over the skies of Israel and Jordan, where our military came together to stop those missiles falling on those two countries just a few weeks ago. We will work with whomever the American people choose to be in the White House over generations now. Whatever the colour of the political party in number 10 or the White House, the UK and the US
let you answer
work
the question,
together
but you
extremely closely.
You haven't actually answered the question. If you have to meet Donald Trump...
I think I have answered the question, you just didn't like the answer.
Not for me to like or dislike your answers, it's for me to get out a clear answer. If you were to meet Donald Trump after describing him as a neo-Nazi sympathising sociopath, do you think that sets a good tone for our Foreign Secretary and potentially the new President of the United States?
Well, as I've said, you'll struggle to find anyone who hasn't had things to say about Donald Trump. He's just picked a vice president who's had some pretty choice language.
And what do you make of his comments then?
The truth is, When I speak to Republicans, and I've spoken to many, as you know, including those who might be his defence secretary or secretary of state, Donald Trump has the thickest of skins. There is a lot of rhetoric, but look at the action. Okay. He was the first to give javelins to Ukraine after 2015. He talked about withdrawing from NATO. He actually increased troops to NATO. So in a grown-up world, in the national interests of this country, of course, if the American people choose Donald Trump as their president, we will work as closely with him as we can, and we will seek to influence him where we disagree.
J.D. Vance, you mentioned his running mate, has said in the past that he was wrong about Donald Trump, and now he's his running mate for vice president. And yes, you have said he's made some choice comments. He said that in a conference that the UK is the first truly Islamist country, and I think he was laying that out as a joke. Regardless, he said he was wrong about Donald Trump. Are you now saying that?
Well, look, let me just say on J.D. Vance that I've met him now on several occasions. We share a similar working class background with addiction issues in our family. We've written books on that. We've talked about that, and we're both Christians. So I think I can find common ground with J.D. Vance. As I have said, Donald Trump is the biggest, in many ways, of political characters we have at this point on the planet. Lots of people have had things to say, but in our common interests, with security as a central challenge in the global community, war in the Middle East, war in Europe, with tremendous challenges for cost of living across the globe, there is a lot of common cause that the UK can strike with the US, and we will do that with whomever is in the White House.
Foreign Secretary David Lammy, thank you very much for your time with us here on BBC Breakfast.
Thank you.